All right, welcome back to KM6LYW Radio, the show about amateur radio or ham radio, reimagining radio in the information age. Hey, let's talk about data modes. How do you encode data on radio? All the different types. Why would you use one mode over another? What's your favorite mode this time on KM6LYW Radio? Yeah, all right, welcome back. Free bumper music. I don't think we've done Van Halen yet, right? So there's some simple science here behind data mode. So what is a data mode? That's where you basically encode information into a radio wave and then decode it or demodulate it on the other end. So there's two processes. One, you need an application that generates data and sends it to a radio transmitter, and it modulates that somehow. How we modulate, that's important. There's a bunch of different ways we can do it, and it really depends on your radio, your conditions, your power, your antenna, your frequency, and all of those kind of demand different types of modulation techniques. You might be familiar with two voice modulation modes. One's AM and one's FM, right? One is AM, where your volume goes up and down, and that's the squiggly line that you send to your speaker and amplify. Then you got FM mode, where you've got a single waveform, but you change the frequency a little bit, but you do it really fast. And this is the squiggly line that you send to your speaker and you listen to. So those are analog modes. So with data modes, we want something more binary, more like on and off, bits, ones and zeros. So we've got a variety of different ways we can do this. We've got something called frequency shift keying, phase shift keying, and it gets more complicated from there. You can have multiple versions of those. There's quadrature amplitude modulation. We won't get into all the details, but I think the important things is like frequency shift keying. That's where you have a frequency and you move it back and forth, kind of like FM, only it's more discrete rather than continuous. Okay, that's frequency shift keying. Those are modes like APRS, AX.25, modem sounds, any modem sounds you hear on the radio. It's a mark and a space, and it's like there's a tone at 1200 and 2200, and you just shift the frequency, high frequency, low frequency. So to do a voice analog of that, it would be me going dee-doo, right? High, low, high, low, high, low. And that's me encoding data. So, a high could be a 1 and a low could be a 0. So that's frequency shift keying. It's really the most simple. Phase shift keying, on the other hand, is where you have a tone and static. So a tone would be 1 and static would be a 0. Actually, what's really happened is you have a sine wave or a carrier like this, and then you sneak in another wave on top of it. And now when it's in phase, that's a 1. But if it's 180 degrees out of phase, that's a 0. So you get more of a square wave. So it's kind of like with phase shift keying, it's either a sine wave or a square wave is for ones and zeros. So that's frequency shift keying, phase shift keying. And there's other protocol things you can put on top of those, like compression. You can compress your data to get more data through using the same bandwidth for the channel. There's forward error correction, where you can add some bits on the front end of a packet, so you can reconstruct a damaged packet that's in transit, but it takes a little longer to transmit. So there's all kinds of tricks and techniques you can use to get data through. So frequencies. So we usually use different modes on higher frequencies. So like we have UHF, which is like 400 megahertz. We have VHF about 140. Then we have the HF modes, which are really low frequencies, like 14 megahertz. And so we use a different mode depending on the frequency we're using. So high frequency, we've got a lot of resolution. We can move frequencies around really quick and get a lot of data out really fast. That's what's cool about UHF, or even like Wi-Fi, which is 2.4 gigahertz. You can stream movies on it. But what's wrong with Wi-Fi? It doesn't go very far. So higher frequencies don't go long and far. They scatter all over the place because they're higher wavelength. I know a lot of Pink Floyd people get this wrong because this is actually inaccurate. The high frequency stuff bends more than the low frequency stuff. So this spectrum should actually be reversed. So a UHF signal scatters all over the place into the air. Half your signal goes into space, the other half goes into the ground. VHF and HF frequencies, much lower frequencies, actually travel in straight lines a lot farther. But since they're lower frequencies, you can't cram as much data into the bandwidth of the channel, or the frequency of the channel. So that's kind of the difference. If there was one mode to rule them all, it would be simple. But we've got so many different conditions to consider. So on HF, we have to propagate around the world. So we've got fade coming in and out. With UHF, it doesn't go very far, but it kind of refracts around and gets into buildings and stuff. So frequency considerations when it comes to the modes that you're using. So I'm just going to talk about maybe 3 or 4 modes and maybe do some examples here. There are probably 50 or 60 different ways you can encode data into a radio signal, but we're going to do some of the more popular ones. We're going to talk about APRS, AX.25 networking. We're going to run FLDigi, maybe do some phase shift keying, BPSK31, and then there's stuff like RDOP and VARA, which are like email protocols, and they actually employ different modes depending on the perceived conditions at that moment. So if a signal isn't getting through and coming back, it'll actually shift down into frequency shift keying from phase shift keying, because frequency shift keying is a little more reliable. Frequency shift keying, you can actually get all of your power into a single signal. And we're assuming your radio is only like 60 to 100 watts. It's fixed, right? So with frequency shift keying, we'll actually go farther, but it's slower than phase shift keying, because with phase shift keying, you have like a much wider signal. So your power has to be distributed amongst that wide signal. Whereas with frequency shift keying, where you got a single tone, all of your power goes into that one sine wave that you just changed the frequency of a little bit. So that's just an introduction to data modes. Let's talk about the most common ones, and let's see what they actually sound like and how much data we can push through them here. Now, starting with APRS, which stands for Advanced Packet Reporting Service, this is where you can send small bits of data on VHF frequencies. 144.39 here in America is 144.8 in SEPT or Europe countries, and we use AFSK, asynchronous frequency shift keying. This is where we're doing the 1200 and 2200 tones, mark in space, and we do them at 1200 cycles per second, 1200 baud. So that's like the channel bandwidth. Now we can encode data into that at slightly less than that, but this is exactly how modems worked in the 80s. So it sounds a lot like this. I'm gonna turn the volume up here, and you're gonna hear the modem tones. And I've got DigiPi running a TNC and web chat here. I can send my position. There it is. We've got our position. See ourselves, but you can hear the tones, and that scratchy sound is just those two tones alternating at 1200 baud. I can send myself a message. And you're hearing the transmissions and the receptions here. So this is what it's a horrible sound. This is what AFSK keying sounds like at 14 on 144390. Now you can get, instead of 1200 baud like on UHF, it's a little more common. You can actually get 9600 baud marks and spaces. It's a lot faster. Most radios can't do it because of the emphasis and equalizations won't handle those levels of frequency. So we generally stick to 1200 baud for APRS for AFSK keying. Now there's other stuff like M12 that's coming about. So new packet modes. Those actually use combinations of phase shift keying, which is pretty cool. So we might be able to see that in the future. But right now we're still using 1980s technology for APRS. All right, let's change frequency. Let's kick this down to 14 megahertz. 14070 is really what you want for a mode called BPSK31. That stands for binary phase shift keying. We're not doing frequency shift keying. 31, and the 31 stands for the actual width in hertz on the band here at 14070 megahertz. Now I've kicked it up to 14071 because I noticed a signal there. It's actually called Olivia, and it's frequency shift keying, and there's 8 tones at a width of 250 hertz, and you can see them here, and you can see the guys talking. See if I can see what this sounds like. You hear that whistling sound? So that's 8 tones moving back and forth. And this is Bill talking, KB8USZ talking to 85QU. And he's saying, well, I don't know, I guess the other guy's Bill, but he's saying 73 and God bless, and he's spitting out the time there. But that is an Olivia 8250. So 8 tones, frequency shift king, with a width of 250. And you can almost hear those tones moving back and forth. So those musical ones are pretty cool. That's Olivia or probably Contestia. They're very similar. The other cool thing with FL Digi is press in this RX ID because it will tell you what if a new mode comes on, so you don't have to recognize it by ear. See, this says OL8250. That means it's Olivia 8250. I come up here to operator mode and come down to Olivia and do 8250. And I am decoding that signal, and it says in the bottom here. But hey, that's just a bonus. That's frequency shift keying. That's pretty cool. What's cool about those modes is they have forward error correction too. So instead of just gibberish, they will give you a blank or a non-decode, so that's pretty cool. But you have to pack in a few more bits to get those redundancy checks. So that's Olivia. So I'm going to go down to PSK. I'm going to BPSK31 binary phase shift keying 3-1, and of course I don't see anyone on the channel at the moment. I'm going to kick this down to 14070, and I am looking for a signal down here. I don't see one. So what I'm going to do is just do a radio test. FL Digi has a test here. I like to line up at 1500, and then you're going to hear what... Actually, I'll turn the volume knob on the correct radio here. You're going to hear what PSK31 sounds like. It sounds a lot like this. I'm going to kick up the monitor a little bit. I know, monitor level. You hear that? 2 signals interfering with each other. That is that is phase shift keying. So you hear a tone and then kind of a distortion, and it cycles between, in and out of phase between 0 and 180 degrees. Now you can do like quadulature stuff too, where there's 90 and 270 and 180 and 0, and you can get 4 bits out of that phase distortion. But that's what me calling CQ sounds like. I'm gonna see if anyone answers here. All right, call in CQ again. Let's get somebody on the line here. We actually got another signal right below us here at 1407.93. NA1SA is talking. Let's see if anyone responds here where I just transmitted. We know we're at BPSK31. We see it down there. Hey, I see KM6LYW from KB8QAP. I can say KB8QAP. Day KM6LYW, and I'm going to start transmitting. Thanks for responding. Name here is Craig, BTU, and I'm going to hit Control R. That means end. Hopefully you can hear that transmission. So that's phase shift keying happening, and I'm talking to BP8QAP. He had an okay signal. We're gonna watch for his signal to pop up right here. Yep, there he is. He says, "No, we got a CQer up here." Someone's calling. No, we see a CQ and my call sign from KB8QAP. It says, "Hello, Craig." And see, this is about as fast as you can type, right? Which is what I like. Now, if you're a slow typer, this is, there's gonna be some dead space, but that's cool. He's given us an RST of 54. It's hard to give an RST on a wide channel here. I don't know. I can just say my signal to noise ratio is 22 or something. And I can say KB8QAP. Now, I'm still receiving day KM6LYW. What I like to do is just put this in a cut buffer and do copy. Let's see. He's done transmitting. I don't see a signal there. And I'm going to start the transmission down here. Great to meet you, Jeff. I'm doing a demo video. I hope you don't mind seeing this QS on YouTube. RST, I'm going to do 54. SNR was 22 dB. I'm in California. Back to you, Jeff. When people put K on the end, I don't know. Then a control R means stop transmitting. All right, we stopped transmitting. So again, phase shift keying. You can see the two tones almost down here. I wish I could zoom that in because it's pretty cool looking. Because there's like a lines, instead of moving back and forth, the lines get narrow and they go. I don't know. It's hard to explain, but you can actually see the signal down there. Let's say KB8QAP saying, Roger, Roger, on your YouTube channel. I look forward. I wonder if he's a viewer. Is he a subscriber? Can you say like and subscribe on Amateur Radio? Let's see. I look forward to seeing it. He says, the weather in West Michigan today is 35. Oh my gosh. And 35 and sunny. Wow. Okay. Well, I'll take that. I'll give him my report too. It's 45 and pouring rain. That's a whole video all by itself, right? How does the weather affect your rig? It's a good question. I know it lowers the SWR, your resonant frequency. It gets slower, but it is pouring rain here. So this is like a bad example almost. And his signal isn't very good. I mean, it's barely detectable down here. And of course, this guy's talking here on a different frequency. And he says, back to you. Yeah, you can't make much out of it. And so I can do my paste. He's still typing stuff. KB8QAP. He just threw his call sign in there. And I can start transmitting. Copy that. I'm a Yaesu FT710. You get anxiety because it's catching up at 60 watts using DigiPi. DigiPi.org. I can advertise that because it's related to amateur radio, right? It's pouring rain here expecting floods and really low snow. In fact, I should probably loosen up my antenna. You sound great here. I'm going to let you go for the sake of the YouTube viewers, but thanks for the QSO. So you can backspace too and fix the for the QSO. Take care. 7-3 from Craig. KM6LYW talking to KB8QAP. And put control R on the end of that. So that's it. That's phase shift keying. Pretty cool. It's kind of like you have two tones and then like distortion levels in between them for phase shift keying. So we got to talk to Jeff here. KM6LYW Day, KB8QAP. Thanks for QSO from California. But see, that's not a very good, strong signal, but I'm getting like 100% copy. That's what's cool about the phase shift keying stuff. We're getting high bandwidth, reasonable amount of power because it's not a completely narrow signal, but it's 31 hertz wide, so it's just the right amount of power getting into that. So yeah, this guy's saying thanks. So thank you, Jeff. Appreciate it, man. If you're a subscriber or viewer, I'll get this out. I'll get this out to you. I'll get you a link to that video. Thank you, Jeff. That was phase shift keying. I'm going to switch it real quick. I'm not going to belabor this because I know most of you know how to use WS-JTX FT8, but this is a frequency shift keying where we just move one tone back and forth rather than the interference pattern between two tones. So again, on DigiPi here, I'm going to switch it over to WS-JTX mode. We can see the DigiPi screen here is WS-JTX. Go over here and click on the launch link, and we got WS-JTX. You can actually scroll this up to see the actual signals. Now here we need to switch over to that. I'm going to change frequencies a little bit. It's right next door. It's just a little bit up the dial. We got FT8 happening here. I'm not seeing much signals here. No, they're there. I got each one of these lines is a user, and I think there are 3 spots that a tone can be in. So this is frequency shift keying. So we've got one tone, but instead of mark and space, it's doing mark, space, and null. And so here, here, and here might be the letter A. Here, here, and back again might be B. So that's how we're doing the encoding for FT8 for frequency shift keying. Again, all of our power is going into one sinusoidal wave, so it's really getting out versus trying to spread out our signal, trying to spread the power over a broader spectrum. So that is FT8 happening. Actually, you can just maximize this. I'm gonna use good amateur radio amateur radio techniques here, operating practices. So I'm not going to stomp anybody. Don't be that guy. And I'm going to go ahead and call CQ. And this is what that frequency shift keying sounds like. You can hear that tone moving back and forth between three different places. So it's kind of like, and you're getting very low bandwidth, right? You're maybe getting like 3 or 4 characters per second at the very most. So I'm calling CQ. So that's what the frequency shift keying sounds like on WSJTX, of course. Someone heard my signal. Hey, KJ5DZV, thank you very much for responding. He's coming in at a -13. But see, that whole 15-second frame, all I got was KM6LYW and his call sign and -13, right? So very slow bandwidth, but very sure. And it goes a long way because all of your power is going into that one tone. Of course, I'm going to send him a, what did I give him? I sent him a 3 and he gave me a -13. Actually, it's not very good at, because I'm pushing 60 watts. That's, for me, that's a lot here. Yeah, that was a lot of fun. Thanks for hanging out with me here today. We actually made some contacts. You know, it usually doesn't go this well or this easy, right? I think we really lucked out getting some cool ham radio operators here on these different kinds of modes. Hey, the reason you're watching this ad-free is because of all the cool people over here that you see on the left side of your screen. These are the patrons of the channel, patreon.com/KM6LYW. You guys are awesome. Thank you so much for helping out here. Patrons not only make this ad free, but they also get access to the DigiPi SD card image. You get a Raspberry Pi, you download the DigiPi as a patron, and you put it in a Raspberry Pi here. That's what we've been using this whole time. And it gives you access to all of these data modes we talk about. So think of this channel as like the lecture, you know, for your data modes, and then think of DigiPi as your lab materials, right? So you can actually play along at home and use the modes that we talk about on this channel here at KM6LYW Radio. So every mode you can think of is here, and it's all done with the web browser. It kind of turns your radio into a website. So all you really need is a web browser. You don't need a monitor and keyboard because everyone already has a monitor and keyboard in their phone. So all you need is a web browser and Wi-Fi. It's great stuff for on the summits and whatnot too. So DigiPi can be a little tiny guy, or it can be this the big guy over here, a Pi 5 with the big screen. You can even hook it into a monitor if you want. I've got the Raspberry Pi 02 wireless. If you've got a more expensive rig, all you need is a USB cable and a Raspberry Pi. We're talking about $18 for a Raspberry Pi 02 wireless. Really making radio modes accessible. You don't need to know Linux or be a guru. It's all web-based. You enter your call sign and your location and your rig type and your connectivity device, that kind of stuff, how you're hooking up to your radio. And then you just start operating. You turn on your favorite mode, and then you click on the link for your mode and start operating in your web browser. And that could be on your phone, either in the easy chair in the other room over Wi-Fi or on the summit or in the park. This is us doing WSJTX. We just did that. We've got a bunch of different interfaces. If you've got a dual band rig, we can do all the APRS and packet modes, AX.25. We've got a fun APRS messaging interface because APRS isn't about positioning. It's about messaging. It's instant messaging. If you're not using APRS on your APRS enabled radio, you might as well be using like a smartphone and never text anyone. Okay, so get online with APRS, you guys. Even Masters Communications has a cool radio interface device. Some great examples here. We can do email over radio. This is us doing FLDigi. Remember, we just did that, only this is happening on a tablet here in this screenshot. That's kind of fun. So we've got slow scan television here, which is one of my favorite modes. We've even got a bulletin board we can log in with the chat room, talk to other users, and we've got some video games on there too, so you can play Zork. All right, guys, thanks a bunch for hanging out. This has been so much fun. We are out of time here. DigiPi.org. That's the URL to take away. DigiPi.org. Thank you, patrons. Really appreciate it. Hey, my name is Craig. Amateur radio call sign KM6LYW. I'm in California and I'm clear.